the book is more about relationships and the people that are important to me and that have shaped my life. It's more about that than anything. And wrestling is sort of, the backdrop. Of course, I was born and raised in the biggest professional wrestling family in the world. And I've worked in WWE for almost 2 decades. And I've done so many interviews over the years. I was on a reality TV show for 7 years. I feel like I've been in the spotlight for almost 2 decades, and I realized last June when I started writing my book, I realized I said I don't think people really know my story. People don't really know my story. So like when people are reading my book now, they're saying like, I never knew that. I never knew that about you. I never knew that you went through that. I never knew those moments. It's a piece that I'm so proud of because I want people to read my book and laugh, cry, feel, and heal. Like I feel like you're going to look at the thing is with the book too, I deliberately wrote the book in a way that's very simple. I didn't want a complex book. I wanted to write a book that would leave no reader behind so that anyone, whether you love wrestling, like wrestling, don't really care about wrestling, or don't know anything about WWE or professional wrestling, I want everybody to understand it because it's so much for me about redefining the way that you look at success in your life. And that's a big takeaway is in a family that has done everything. I am not going to be the first person in my family to win a world championship.
Right.
I'm not going to be the first person in my family to get in the Hall of Fame. I'm not going to be the first person in my family to main event a WrestleMania. But I am going to be the first person in my family to not be broke and not be broken inside. That's the most important thing is to leave with my head held high. So while I was, going through all these chapters, it's like I kept chasing all these things that I thought were going to make me happy. And then when you sort of get to the end, you realize all the things that I was chasing, they weren't the things that were going to make me happy. So it's definitely going to people that read it will I think redefine the way that they look at success in their own lives. Everything I have in my life is because of professional wrestling. Everything I have in my life, I owe to wrestling. But it's not to say that along the way that it wasn't hard and that there weren't challenges and there weren't bumps in the road and there weren't like it that all of those things have made me who I am today. They've made me really strong. And my dad, and that's what I document very early on, that my dad was going through something very, very hard in his personal life. He was battling a lot of demons. And I explain in the book what he was going through. I wanted to explain that early on because I didn't want people to shape their view of what they thought of my dad until they got to the end. I wanted them to know that my dad, was struggling. He was really, really struggling in his life, which that is what created a lot of the instability for me as a kid in my own life. So when I got to WWE, I never wanted to be like my dad in the sense that my dad just really struggled to keep his job in WWE. I was like, I'm going to do everything I can to be perfect for everyone. By the way, this personality, I'm a recovering people pleaser. When I was in school, I was the same way. I wanted to be a straight A student. I wanted my teachers to love me. I wanted to be the perfect, kid. When I was a teenager, I graduated high school a year early because I was like, I just wanted to challenge myself to see if I could do it. But a lot of it was like, just wanted to be perfect and that level of perfectionism and just trying to make everyone happy. I realized halfway through writing my book, I was like, you're trying to make everyone else so happy throughout my whole life, not just in WWE. You're trying to make everyone so happy that you've forgotten who the hell you are.
What did his CTE diagnosis when it came back and it was obviously as bad as it was? Did that was that an exhale of kind of like it explains why some of the things he did like it wasn't almost out of his control at some point in his life.
So with my dad, and I was talking to my husband about this the other day, and I said, because somebody had asked me in my family, they were like, what made you feel like you could tell this stuff, talk about your dad's brain injury? And I said, I had to be able to explain to the reader that my dad was going through something very traumatic for most of his life. My dad, he played Pop Warner football started playing it when he was 11 years old. And so when we were kids growing up, my dad would brag and talk about, how hard he would play football. And he said that, he would talk about getting, as he put it in his words, he goes, I would get my bell rung, but the coaches loved me so much because I just kept playing. I just kept going. I just kept getting back on the field. And it was later on in my life, I said to my sisters, I said, man, like, do you remember when Daddy would just brag about those football days, like of, he was a nose guard, he was a defensive tackle, like my dad loved football, and that's kind of like his before he ever was a wrestler, he was a shot putter and a football player. He would brag about it. And now we realize, hey, that's not good. You know what I mean? Especially when you're doing that with no helmets. It's just, but back then in the 60s, 70s, wasn't a thing. I realized that when my dad passed away, as I mentioned in the book, I realized that I spent my whole adult life not understanding why my dad was acting the way that he was acting.
Right.
And so I wanted the reader to understand that he wasn't just a drug addict or an alcoholic or a bad person. He was actually living with a traumatic brain injury since he was in his early teens. And so it was just something we never understood. It was something that he was like, it was manifesting for a very long time. And so as he got older, it just was spiraling out of control. But we're it's something I felt like if I didn't explain to the reader, you guys would look at my dad in a different way that I don't want you to
Right.
look at him. You guys, in fairness to the story, you needed to know that.
Is there ever a point where you think like, hey, it would have been better if I was starting in this era? Or is it almost like if people like me and Beth or AJ aren't there, then maybe this era is delayed a little bit because they don't have those people pushing, some of the boundaries at that point.
I think that truthfully, it would be easier for me to start where the company is right now because Triple H, he really respects wrestling. He loves great great wrestling. Whether you're a guy or a girl, I feel like he really respects wrestlers. And respects good wrestling, respects the work. I think that of course, he understands the entertainment value of everything, but like I think it would have been easier for me now to debut in this era for sure. But that's the thing is that wasn't my journey. So it was tricky. It was tricky debuting in the Divas era, but it taught that debuting in 2008 taught me so much about grit. I turned every no into a yes. I was rejected by WWE for like 5 years. I kept sending in tapes. I kept trying to, and I couldn't just I mean, listen, Joseph, I would have loved to have had Bret Hart make a call for me. I would have given anything to be like, Bret, just call
But
someone,
but they couldn't at the time.
Bret wasn't on good terms with them at the time. I couldn't, my dad wasn't on like he wasn't on bad terms, but he didn't have that relationship with anybody in the company. We didn't have any family that was working there that could just make a call. My life would have been so much easier if family members could have made that call.
What made you kind of bring out this other alternate, natty character that we see in Bloodsport and GCW to now? Was she always in there, or is it just something that was time to do?
She was always in there. She was in there from my early days in the dungeon. I always had this like I love that physical aggressive style. I love wrestling men because I can just go like hit them hard. I can wrestle really hard with like because when I was training in the dungeon, I only had men. Like
Right.
there was very few women that were doing it back when I first started training in the early 2000s. So I just always loved that fast, aggressive style that Bloodsport, kind of embodies. And so I got about halfway through writing the book, and I was like, I had this revelation. I was like, I need to just be Natty. I just need to because the book was extremely therapeutic for me. And I was like, why don't you just be her? You've never been her. Like, take a chance on her. What do you have
Right.
to lose? Take a chance on her. And so it led me to at WrestleMania season, I got on a call with Josh Barnett. He runs Bloodsport,
Yeah.
and Josh is a good friend of mine. I've trained with him, and we got on a call together and talked about me doing Bloodsport. I walked up to Triple H at rehearsals at Monday Night Raw, and he's very approachable and he's very collaborative and he's very like he's a very forward thinker. And I just told him, I said, I want to do this. And he was so supportive. He's like, yeah, let's do it. He's like, I love that idea. Let's do it. Let's go for it. And from that moment on, I was able to really push like put my foot on the gas.
Yeah.
After I did Bloodsport, after my performance, it was trending for like 2 days, and I saw Hunter at WrestleMania, and he was walking and he stopped to talk to me, and he's like, I heard it was amazing. He's like, I'm seeing all this footage. He's like, I wish I could have been there. He was busy getting ready for his own Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Uh, so he was just so supportive of me, and it just gave me the courage to keep going and pushing forward with this idea. And what's really cool about it is I'm the first person in WWE history to be working with the WWE contract, but building a character outside the company. So it's like, it's like Cactus Jack and Mick Foley. Natty is Cactus Jack and Natalya is Mick Foley.
Do you think or do you want to ever bring some version of that to WWE at some point? I mean, obviously, there's
Yes.
okay.
Yeah. It's all I think about.